Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive shift in how the world works. For decades, there's been this idea of a rules-based order, a system of laws and norms that kept things, relatively stable. But that seems to be breaking down, leading to what some are now calling the anything goes era. So let's break down what that really means. And it really all starts with this one quote from The Economist. This sentence just perfectly captures this feeling that the old guardrails are gone. And believe me, the consequences of that are rippling way, way beyond the US, challenging the very idea of how power is supposed to work.
So to really get what's changed, you just have to look back. Think about President Truman in the 1950s. The guy lived on a modest army pension. The thought of cashing in on the presidency? Unthinkable. Now, fast forward to today. The sources point to a president accepting really lavish gifts, whose family is striking international business deals. The point here isn't just about style. It's a massive shift in the very norms of power.
Okay, so what do we actually mean by the anything goes era? Well, the source defines it as a time when who you know, your personal access, your relationships, that's all more important than impartial rules. It's a move toward what they call insider capitalism, where the most important question isn't about your product. It's just, hey, do you know the president? And look, this isn't just some abstract concept. We're talking about tangible, real-world examples. The source points to things like a single gold bar worth $130,000, accepted by the president from a country looking for a little favor. It's a pretty stark symbol of how personal deals are starting to replace traditional diplomacy. But here's the thing. This is not just an American story. Not by a long shot. This mindset is popping up in different ways all across the globe. We're seeing a brand new playbook emerge, where countries are chasing their interests with a much more personal and, often more aggressive edge. I mean, just look at the Middle East. This new playbook is on full display. The Saudi crown prince, who was once called a pariah over the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, is suddenly welcomed back. And in this new approach, our own intelligence findings are just publicly set aside. And what's the trade? Agreements on fighter jets and strategic alliances. It's like principles themselves are now on the negotiating table. This breakdown of norms isn't just happening between nations. It's also happening within them. In Ukraine, while citizens like Lacia Mazur are paying the ultimate price of war, there's this really corrosive drama unfolding behind the scenes that's threatening the country from the inside out. So while the country is literally fighting for its survival, a massive corruption scandal explodes. I mean, the allegations you see here are just stunning. From huge sums of money gone missing to witness intimidation. This isn't just a crime. One source calls it the worst crisis the president has faced since the invasion. It's a shocking example of rules collapsing at the exact moment you need them most. Meanwhile, you hop over to Asia and you see a similar kind of assertiveness. When Japan's prime minister suggested that Taiwan's security was linked to its own, China's response wasn't a polite diplomatic disagreement. No, it was a public demand for a retraction. That's the new playbook. Direct, in-your-face pressure that just tosses traditional diplomacy out the window. So what actually happens when these rules start to fray? Well, the consequences aren't just ideas on a page. They are very, very real. You can feel them on the ground. You can see them in the economy, and you can see them on the streets. The conflict in Gaza is like a perfect storm of all these competing interests. As you can see, you've got the UN pushing a peace plan, while the key players on the ground are rejecting it, and major world powers are taking completely contradictory actions. It is a textbook example of the international system just failing to find a unified path forward, with everybody just running their own agenda. And the consequences of that on the ground are incredibly stark. In the West Bank, the UN recorded a record number of attacks by Israeli settlers, the highest monthly count in nearly 2 decades. This is a direct measure of just how much instability is rising. The economic fallout is just as sharp. In the world of global trade, the old order is being completely turned on its head. German car makers used to dominate in China. Now their market share is plummeting. And at the exact same time, a flood of Chinese electric vehicles is gaining serious ground in Europe. The economic ground is literally shifting under everyone's feet. And all of this erosion of trust, it's fueling unrest. From Mexico City to Manila, people are protesting the very corruption and self-dealing that seems to define this new era. And what's really interesting is the rise of this connected global Gen Z movement, a whole new generation of activists who are pushing back against a system they feel has completely failed them. So with all this happening, you have to wonder, are there any countercurrents? Is everybody just accepting this new reality? Well, the source material suggests there are signs of resistance, and they're often coming from some pretty unexpected places. So that's the big question, isn't it? Is everyone just playing along with these new rules? The evidence suggests maybe not. Cracks are starting to appear, and the pushback is coming from some surprising corners. I mean, just consider this apology from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was one of the president's most vocal supporters. It is a pretty remarkable admission from someone who was an architect of the very political style she's now calling toxic. And it's not just individuals. Institutions are also pushing back. When the president tried to federalize the National Guard to deal with protests in Chicago, the courts stepped in. A judge basically said, "Not so fast," blocking the move. Now the Supreme Court is going to have to weigh in on this really crucial question of executive power. And then you've got Europe, which is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It wants to be the global defender of rules in a world that's more and more about might makes right. But internally, it's facing its own massive challenges. If they can't cooperate, it could lead to what the source calls a toxic brew, which would weaken the very group that wants to stand up for the rules-based order. And all of this brings us to the most important question of all. What does a world without rules actually look like? If the old system really is breaking down, what in the world comes next? So let's be super clear about what we even mean by that rules-based order that's under threat. It's the whole collection of treaties, norms, and organizations that were designed to prevent conflicts and encourage countries to work together. It's the framework that basically says might doesn't automatically make right. But as we've seen, that entire system is under enormous pressure. And what seems to be replacing it is a world where powerful nations are seen as being for sale, where every international relationship is just another deal to be made. Which leaves us with this one central challenge. If the old rulebook is truly being torn up right in front of us, what's going to be written next? The answer is unfolding in real time, and we're all living through it. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.